All right, welcome everyone. My name is Brandon McLean. I'm the owner of Code Switch Consulting. We are a web and mobile custom software development firm located here in Atlanta, Georgia. And today I'm talking to Victor Jaques. Victor's somebody that I partner with on the design side, and he has his own full-fledged design and development company called VAJ Designs. And I normally see it when I'm on meetings with you, but I do love your motto, Victor, and I'm not going to steal your thunder with what your motto is. So if you would be so kind to tell us what your company's motto is.
Appreciate it. Yeah, so our motto is we make all the things look damn good. So, it's a nice,
Damn good.
nice, yeah, damn good. That's right. Nice way to really hit home exactly, what we do for folks.
That's right. That's right. Well, I appreciate it, sir, giving us a little bit of your time today. And I kind of wanted to start with, this whole series kind of started really at a conversation with my wife and just kind of letting her know kind of what the differences were with what our company does, which is mostly kind of development of very kind of high functioning, high feature applications versus kind of the process of creating kind of more so promotional websites and marketing websites. And
Got
it
it.
was apparent kind of in that conversation that that's not always known, right? But
Yep.
with certain customers and clients, kind of that there
Yep.
is even a difference there.
Yep.
And so it kind of started from there, and it's kind of evolving into. I think it's good to have a discussion of what the overall process looks like. Somebody wants to come and create a solution or have something created, kind of knowing the different parts of that, from planning, from the design aspect, from development, and just kind of understanding what they're getting themselves into a little bit. So that's kind of what the basis of these conversations were. Um,
Cool.
one question just to kind of start off with is I've noticed a lot of folks also don't necessarily aren't aware of the difference between web design and web development just overall.
Yep.
You kind of get a lot of customers that may say, "Hey, I need a website designed," and
Yep.
they may think they need it developed, or I need
Yep.
a website developed, but I actually need it
Yep.
designed.
Yep.
Um, so one, do you see that a lot, kind of with certain clients and customers that you
Absolutely.
work with?
Absolutely, I get it all the time. And I'll tell you one of the analogies I've used for people in the past that I find really helps is the difference between architecture and construction or development, right? And so I'll tell people, I'll be like, if you think of it this way, think of it as you gotta build a house. You need the architecture to draw up the blueprints, and then you need the construction workers to physically build it. They're rarely the same person. You wouldn't necessarily might feel a little funny about the construction worker being like, "Oh yeah, I drew up these blueprints." Like, "Oh, which one are you actually the expert at?" You know what I'm saying? Or vice
Right.
versa. The architect coming in and be like, "Hey, I can build this for you too." You'd be like, "Really?" So, I give that people that kind of analogy. So I say, on the design side is really the visual. Like we create how the interface, how it looks, and the user experience, how it functions, and then the development actually brings that to life. They actually, build that out, create the functionality, and build it all the way out.
No, that's an awesome analogy. It really does break it down to just like you said, the visual versus like the construction aspect of it, and
Yeah.
that goes through all aspects. So like all phases, right? So designers even have a whole set of different tools
Yep.
that they use to kind of as for their portion of the solution versus a developer.
Right.
From our standpoint, we utilize programming languages, we utilize frameworks, um, things called IDEs or integrated development environment, where you actually write the code. In some cases, you may be kind of building and compiling that code. What types of tools and services are used kind of more so on the design side?
Sure. So on the design side, things have kind of changed over the years because different uh, types of software have become the industry standard. But currently, right now, on the web design side, is Figma, and it is a web design tool. It's really really robust. It allows us to create all types of even reusable components. So, like if we create some type of interface or a button style or some form or whatever it is, we can make it a reusable component that has different like states to it. Like this is the state, this is how it looks when it's an error, and this is how it looks when it's processing, and this is the state when it's complete. We can think through all those things on a really granular level, and deliver that to the development team to build out. So it's very compatible with a lot of the like the development tools, and and you can export uh, code from it as well. I think like the CSS, you can kind of export from it as well based off of our designs. So that is the main tool. I would say that's the industry leader right now in the web designs space.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we definitely use Figma a lot. I know at some points we were using a tool called Envision. I don't know
Mhm.
if they're still kind of around as much. I know Adobe was big in the design space, but yeah, Figma definitely seems to be like the king at this
Mhm.
point.
And Adobe actually bought Figma, so
Mm,
it's not under the because Figma is so you know robust. It's not really under the Creative Cloud umbrella where you can download and install it through Adobe yet, but I'm sure they're working on it. But Adobe's version is the Adobe version of Figma was called Adobe XD. That was their web design application. But Figma just basically outmuscled it out of the out of the industry. So Figma was just like Adobe XD. Just they couldn't really compete with Figma. They weren't able to keep up with all the features that Figma had, and so Adobe stopped supporting updates for XD and then bought Figma.
Jeez, jeez, powerful
Yeah,
moves like
yeah,
that. Wow. Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So Figma's kind of the main tool. So a customer or a client coming in and saying, "Hey, this is something that I would like to build." Um, what would they expect, or kind of what does that process of design look like? Are they need to get access to Figma? What would they be looking at to kind of assess the design and the direction for that solution?
Sure. So they actually wouldn't need a Figma account unless they needed to make certain types of edits or things like that. But for the most part, that really shouldn't be within their wheelhouse if they're the client. Um, so what Figma does is it allows us to export links from our design. So we can export and there's various types of links. We can export um, a link to a prototype. So Figma actually supports prototyping. So you don't just have to work statically. You can actually create animations and things like that, and transitions and link pages and all of those type of things. So you can really simulate the functionality of the website. And so we can generate from that design. Figma will allow you to export a prototype link, and we can share that with the client so that they can actually click around and get a feel for how it's meant to look and feel and function before it's even sent off to development. So that's one of the main really powerful things about that tool. And then from the development side, we can export uh, a dev version of that design where it's easy for the developer to go in and kind of inspect all the elements. Like I said, they can export the CSS, they can look at how things are, they can look at the spacing and the padding and the margins of everything, and all of that, the fonts, the colors, all of that.
Awesome. Yeah, Figma's been a really like a lifesaver because one other thing, so the functional prototyping is huge. Having
Yeah.
that definitely helps the client kind of see how to get from step A to step B for the app, kind of how it will look with hands on. But it also helps the development side because a lot of times we have those same questions. Like
Yeah.
we see this screen and somehow it gets to this screen. We don't, how does that work? And having that
Yep.
prototype there actually shows you that path. So
Absolutely.
I definitely love the prototyping. I also kind of like the collaborative nature of Figma.
Yep.
And I think one thing, if the client were to sign up and get an account, they'd be able to kind of leave comments or leave questions on the
Yep.
screen at different parts of Figma, just to just make sure that that whole process is collaborative. If they have a
Absolutely.
question, they can get it quickly answered and timestamped and things like that.
Absolutely. And
Um,
depending on the type of client and how involved they are, I recommend, if possible, a live walkthrough. So, in addition to actually sending them the prototype, we actually will get on a call with them, share the screen, and talk through a lot of our design choices and things like that, and how things are meant. Because sometimes, even though you have a prototype, it's not always apparently obvious, like how things are meant to work, and the thought process behind what decisions were made. So whenever possible, I like to really do a walkthrough with the client and kind of say, hey, like this is why we went this direction. This is this meets best design principles. This is we have to do this for reasons for accessibility, and really kind of walk them through that way. And then we can get live feedback there as well
yeah,
from
yeah, I'm all for just like anything that enhances collaboration and kind of
Yep.
gives you that real time feedback is definitely definitely needed. So one thing that always used to trip me up from a design perspective is y'all have, just like development, y'all have y'all's own terms as well, right? We have
Yep.
prototypes that you just mentioned. We got lo-fi. Am I saying it right?
Yep.
Low fidelity
Yep.
designs, high fidelity designs. Kind of
Yep.
walk us through what some of those terms mean. Is it required to get a lo-fi design and a hi-fi design, and is it required to have like a design system developed in Figma? Like, kind of walk us through some of the core concepts that a customer would interface with.
Sure. So the short answer is yes. I recommend all of those steps along the process. I'll kind of walk through what they are right now. So generally, when you're doing, especially a more involved custom design of an enterprise level application, we really there's a lot of things that need to be considered, and we need to be able to move relatively fast early in the process because um, creating what we call high fidelity design, which means it's like fully polished. It represents what the final thing will look like, and but that takes time. So you don't want to get caught up really working the nuance of the design early in the process when you're still kind of deciding, you know, like how should this look, how should this function, what should this connect to, where's this going, and all those type of things. So early in the process, we can work with what we call low-fi or low fidelity design, which is like just black and white lines. It's just basic shapes. Sometimes you can even draw by hand, just sketching things by hand, just to really be able to move fast and say, okay, from this screen it goes to this screen, goes to this screen, and if you need to be able to change it, you can change it quickly. Um, so that's a really, really important part of the process. You can really kind of look at the user flow of the like kind of the experience of how it's meant to work. Um, then once that's worked out, then you kind of move on to mid and high fidelity design. I would say, if anything, maybe mid fidelity, you could kind of get away with skipping that part of the process, depending on timing and the the details of the actual interface and all of that. But low fidelity, I definitely recommend that part of the process up front. High fidelity, uh, later on when you're really polishing things up and getting it ready to hand off to development. And what was the other? You asked one of the other terms as well.
Yeah, low fidelity, high fidelity. I think we just kind of covered earlier on prototyping.
Oh, yep, yep.
And then I've seen a lot of designers also just have a very centralized version of their design system. So all their colors, all the
Oh,
fonts, typography.
yes.
things
Yes.
like that.
Yes. So I find that to be really crucial, definitely from a design standpoint, but I think it helps even from a development standpoint. I mean, you can speak to that more than I can, but just to really be thinking very systematically about like the consistency of all the components, the pieces of what make up the interface. And sometimes designers can be very like, I mean, obviously they're creative people, but sometimes creative people aren't necessarily so like logical and like structured in the way that they work. Like if you really give them the freedom, they'll just be kind of just freely moving things here and there, and not being very meticulous and pixel perfect about what they're actually doing. It depends on the designer, but sometimes you find that. And so when you really like focus on creating a design system where we outline, okay, these are the colors that we're using in the interface. This is the color we're using for alerts and error messages. This is the color for confirmation. This is the color that we use for like buttons and links. This is the color we use for um, um, just like emphasis and whatnot, right? You can work all those out. Then we work out, okay, this is the font style for the body copy. We might have two sizes of that. We got the regular size, then we got the smaller size for like legalese and all that type of stuff. Here's the font style for headings. Here's the button style. The button is gonna this is how the button looks in the default state versus the disabled state versus the processing state versus the hover state. Like all of those things really worked out very meticulously, built out in a system guide that the designers then, especially when they're working in the way that these programs like Figma are designed to work with, it allows us to do very complex things in a more rapid way because we are using shared components that the styles are already built in. And then if we need to make changes, we need to update it. Let's say, okay, well we gotta adjust the button a little bit. Well, you can update it in one place in a central location, and then it updates everywhere throughout your interface. So it's important to work in a a very structured way when you're designing these large complex systems because you don't want to waste time and you damn sure don't want to waste your client's money if you're just doing everything manually and then, oh, we got to update this in 50 different places. Well, that's not, you should have only had to update this once. And so, and so on the development side again, so you could speak to it more intelligently than I can, but from what I understand, there are like a central location that you can put your style sheets and things like that. So all of these things carry over and translate to how you guys build it out on your end and can make changes in similar fashion. One central location that then updates throughout the rest of the interface.
No, absolutely, absolutely. I'll be honest with you. When I do development, that's most of the time after spinning up just kind of a new project. That's the first thing I'll tackle. So
Yeah.
kind of what all my primary colors, what are my secondary colors, and just making sure that that configuration's in place, so that
Yep.
I don't have to just like you said, it's managed in a central place. Wherever I use those classes, or however it's configured, I just have to know that it's kind of managed in that one place, and it will be consistent across the app as long as I'm using those classes and those styles. So
Absolutely.
definitely big to have that. I would say from a development perspective as well. What about like mood boards? Do you find yourself using mood boards a lot, or kind of to, like
Sure.
I said, to find inspiration
Yep.
in other
So
ways?
that is earlier in the process. That's before we even get to low fidelity design. So that's where we are, kind of at a high level thinking about I mean, that might be along the same part of the process where we are like developing uh, what are they called again? The personas, right? The personas, which is essentially like the characteristics of your ideal user. So sometimes that might be already established up front, depending on who your client is and all of that. But If not, then we'll go through an exercise. We'll say, okay, well, this application is meant for, um, you know, maybe retired folks between the ages of 70 and 80 who are in this particular position and live in this particular area, make this amount of money, and are have this level of tech savviness or something like that, right? So you start thinking about, the type of person who this interface is actually meant for, and so you're working out the details of that persona. Then you can move on to what we call a mood board, where we can kind of start thinking about like what uh, what's kind of the feeling and the experience we want people to have when they're using this website or application. um, and then from there we can kind of start eventually transitioning to actually working out the design. But there's a lot of work and thought that has to go into what this is and who's this for, before we start really working on design.
Definitely, man. That dovetails right into my next question because that's a lot. That's a lot of
Yeah.
steps right there.
Right.
I don't think
Yep.
a lot of people that are not used to having applications created know that there's a lot of steps with just with the design part of it.
Yep.
I know this
Oh,
is a
and
loaded
then
question. Okay, I'm sorry.
real quick, I just want to also mention user testing. That's another thing that's really important, as well. That some folks might not realize is a thing, or not realize how valuable that is. And you can do user testing in a number of different ways. So, you could do user testing for a prototype. Like it could be a prototype that we build, that just the designers build using Figma, or it can be a prototype that has more, um, more functionality actually built in with the development team. Um, and so there's different ways that you can user test, and you can user test at different points in the process. But it's really, really important, because what it does is it gives you feedback from, you see how people are actually interacting with it. Because prior to that, it's technically theoretical, right? So, even as a designer, I mean, we do this for a living. We do it for a long time. We understand best practices. We understand how to build out a user experience that is meant to be optimized. But that doesn't mean that we always, um, that it doesn't mean that we don't miss anything. And so when you get something in front of people and say, hey, try this out. Like, here's this interface. We want to see you execute this goal. So if this was in front of you and you were trying to do X, Y, and Z, do it for us and let's see how you would do it. And sometimes you find out it can be heartbreaking for a designer in particular. People are mad confused. They're like, yo, I don't know. Am I supposed to click on this? Am I supposed to go over here? I don't know where to go. And we're like, what? But it should have been so obvious. So so it's a really, really important part of the process, and it can save a lot of time and money on the back end, because if you put something out there out in the wild, and realize that you made some fundamental flaws that you could have resolved earlier in the process, you end up wasting more time and money than was necessary. So user testing is definitely a big, 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 big part of the process as well.
Definitely, and this is even before the development user testing. This is you're speaking like just from a design perspective, kind of validating the idea, validating the theories that were used to kind of design the interface and how people navigate from screen to screen.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, no, that's huge. That's huge.
Yep.
Um, Very loaded question.
Sure.
How long should somebody be expecting? And I'm gonna ask this in two ways. How long should somebody be expecting to have like a actual fully featured web application? Just the design section, just the design phase. Are we talking about weeks? Are we talking about months? Longer? And I
Well,
know
it depends.
it depends. I know it depends.
Yeah, it depends. So my smart ass response to that would be is I would tell a client, however long you think it should take, double or triple it. That's my smart ass response. But if we're gonna be more specific, I would say, especially if we're talking about all the steps that we're outlining here, I would say, expect months to be working on the design phase of it alone. And again, we'll be doing a lot of back end work to establish what this is, who's it for, then move on to, a low fidelity. We should probably do some user testing, um, and then we can roll into the design. Then we're probably gonna have to scale back to because we'll work on the design and we'll want to design for the final product, right? That's another thing that people have to keep in mind is these larger projects are phased. Typically, I mean, sometimes you could just build the whole thing and be like, "This is we're not releasing it until it's fully complete." I wouldn't really recommend that path, but usually it's a phased approach. So from a design perspective, we don't really just focus on the 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 first release. We are thinking about this thing in the final version of it. So we're like, okay, well, this is what it's meant to be. This probably won't exist for a year and a half. But what we are getting out for the initial phase of this will be scaled back. We have to remove this feature, this feature, this feature, this feature, and scale it back to just what's going to be out there in the wild. So when people say, "Well, when can I expect this to be done?" Well, when can we expect the first phase to be done? So, yeah, I would say months for the design, then the development, and then from that point forward, we're continuing to build the rest of it out, design and build and release in future phases until the whole thing is complete.
Yeah, yeah, and I definitely like the idea of having that. I guess you're kind of describing a minimum viable product where it's kind
Yep,
of focused initially on those really core pieces and those differentiators for your app, so
yep,
that you can actually give it to people and just kind of have it hands on and say, hey, what do you think? Kind of get that early feedback, so you can kind of continue iterating on that. Um,
yep.
I think another thing a lot of people don't aren't necessarily aware of is typically products are almost never done. There's always going to be something
Yes.
to either to fix or something to
Yep.
add. You're going to hear feedback from your users, and it's just an overall process. I mean, you look at software that we have on our computers that we've had on here for years that receive updates monthly.
Yep.
So it's
Yep.
definitely something that it's oftentimes a living breathing thing that
Yep.
just takes takes some care to kind of continue improving upon.
Yep. Yeah, that's a really good thing to point out as well because you have sometimes people just want to bring you on to design, build it, and then you know then that's it. Like, oh, I want this done by this date, and then and then it'll be done. Then it's out there in the wild, but they might not always realize that um, one way or the other, this thing is going to need updates. It's going to need bug fixes. It's going to need to be modernized and stay up with modern trends and things like that. And someone's gonna have to do it. So
Gonna have to do it.
if you yeah if you don't if you don't want to keep us on to continue what we started, you're gonna have to go get somebody else anyway. So you may as well think about it as an ongoing process from jump.
Absolutely, man.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, and let me ask you this. So, I made the mentioning earlier on about kind of the difference between kind of more so promotional or marketing sites versus these kind of very high functioning, high featured web applications or mobile applications, or
Yes.
to your point earlier, even enterprise scale applications.
Yes.
What do you see a big difference in terms of length of time, complexity, even the process of designing kind of on one side of that spectrum versus another?
Absolutely. There is a massive difference. And before I get into the answer to that question, I just want to use another analogy I give people sometimes when they ask me questions. Sometimes people ask me, how much for a website? And I'll be like, well, that's like asking somebody how much for a car. A car could vary. You could get a car for $500. You can get a car for $200,000. I mean, it depends on what we're talking about here. What's it used for? You need something custom? Do you need something pre-built, working from a template or whatnot? So, I try to frame people's mindset really early on before just like throwing random numbers out there. But to answer your question more specifically, there is a huge difference in the kind of in the marketing, kind of like really small business world. The the website template is becoming more and more robust and more common. So people are using web builders now to build out their sites, to build out their e-commerce sites, and they can plug in all these different things. You can plug in your scheduler, you can plug in your e-commerce store, you can plug in your photo gallery, like all these type of things. And so they want to use platforms like, Wix and Squarespace and WordPress and all of these things, which is perfectly fine. I think that it's important for people to really understand like what level of website versus like web application are you really pursuing. So sometimes people when they're just looking for something, they don't really have the budget for something really custom made. So the level of customization that they want is really whatever overrides we can apply to a pre-existing template or interface or web builder. And so I try to make sure people understand that's in a whole different arena than building out like an enterprise level custom application where we're not using this thing has nothing to do with Wix, like not even close. All right.
Right.
We are building this thing out. Okay. And it is very involved. It has more steps than they may realize, and the budget are on two completely different levels.
Yeah, yeah. Now the template thing, that's an excellent point because even
Yeah.
outside of like I guess Wix and Wix has their own template library, but
Right.
they have standalone template libraries that even if you have somebody kind of building it custom, they can still use a template or use like a templated design.
Right.
But to your point, you're kind of constrained with not being able to change everything about that design,
Yeah.
um, and just kind of being locked into that world. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's very important that people understand there's kind of a difference between designing and definitely even developing kind of more
Yeah.
so the marketing promotional sites versus these kind of web apps that have features. They may have branding requirements for the company and everything like that.
Right.
Um, Loaded question number two, and if and this is probably one that you can't answer.
All right.
Right. So with development, right, the
Uh,
cost that's typically comes out of that is typically driven by the length of time, complexity, external services that we may need to use to enable some of these features.
mm.
Are those the same drivers for costs on the design side, or are there other ones that would need to be considered before I get to the second part of the question, which I think you probably already can tell what that is going to be?
So it, in some ways, yes, it's kind of like some of the things we talked about before, right? So if we're building out something that is really kind of built with a web builder, and we are basically bringing components together and then doing some level of customization. At that point, there's a lot of like we're not designing anything custom in Figma, right? I mean, we can, but it's probably not really necessary to do something like that. We don't need to build out a system guide because it already basically has that baked in, so we can go in and customize things to a certain way. So we want to say, okay, well, this is the style of the heading fonts. We can go in and customize it through their interface. We want to adjust how the buttons look and function. We do that through their interface. So it is a far less custom process for on the design side as well. When we're doing something that is again like fully um, fully custom from the ground up, all those steps that we talked about already are part of the process. And so now we do need to use tools like Figma. We may need to use maybe user Zoom or something like that to do the user testing. um, so there are other parts of the process that are included for larger projects like that.
Gotcha, gotcha. And just like
Yeah.
this, the question right here. Um, let's say somebody wants to build an app. Let's say somebody wants to build a mobile app. They have an awesome idea. It's
Mm.
going to generate them trillions, and they are sure of that. And they come to you and say, "How much should I expect to pay to have this design?" What would be your response to that?
Well, actually, so before I even answer that question for them, what I would actually I would ask them. I know you're not supposed to answer a question with a question, but I typically whenever people start talking about mobile apps, I ask them questions about why they think they need an app in the first place, and do they understand the need for having a natively built mobile app versus just having a website that's responsive.
Okay.
Because because the mobile app is, I think some people think that, oh, they can build an app and they're going to upload it to the store, to the app store, and they're just going to get downloads. It's going to be this whole big thing. But it's like that's not how it works. You're uploading your app to an app store with hundreds of thousands, if not, are there millions? Are there millions? I don't know if there are millions of apps, but a lot of other apps, right? And so not only are people probably, the chances of them even coming across your app are slim to none. And even if they come across it, you got to ask them what what would drive them to download and install this app? Because you got to have a reason for it, right? People aren't just downloading and installing apps willy nilly. Like, that's a whole other thing. It's like this new app on my phone, a new set of notifications I'm gonna be getting. So there has to be a rationale behind why you think you actually need this mobile app, and often that rationale is outside of the app itself. Do you already have a large following? Do you have some like massive campaign that's going to be out there that's going to be directing people to your app? You know what I mean? Like, are you speaking on stage and telling people download this app? Like, you have to have some way of directing people to your app, and there has to be a valid reason for why anybody would actually, even if you told them to, why they would listen and say, okay, I'm going to go to the app store right now, download and install it, and take the time to create an account, set up a username, password, whatever, all that other stuff. So that's so I start with that with folks.
So you hold up.
Now,
You toss their dreams in the trash
oh,
initially. Right. You
yes,
set the
yes,
trap for them. I got
yes,
you. Okay.
yes. They call me the dream killer.
It's true killer. Yeah.
So yeah. So yeah, so I start with that. Then if they already have like it's like, okay, no, definitely we got a solid idea here. This is, like you said, this is definitely $1 trillion idea. And then I'm like, all right, cool. Well, then what we need to do is, I can't give you a number. I can give you a ballpark. I can say, design and build a mobile app. I mean, lower end could be my 50K, like low end maybe. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
High end, 100, 200, 300. It could be a lot of things. Completely depends on the thing. So I might tell them that, be like, here's like a low end, but to be honest with you, we can't really answer that question without scoping out the details, and we had to talk about it from a design and a development perspective, because we have to. And the thing is, like, when they get on a call with like you and I together, right? So I can ask them from a user experience side, you can ask them from a functionality side. A lot of times through the, and this, when you ask them these questions, there are things that are occurring to them that they never thought of. They're like, oh yeah, that's a good point. Oh, I didn't even think that might be something that it might need to include, or all these things. So that really helps them to level set because they might see sticker shock and be like, why, how could it possibly cost that much? Well, it sounds a lot to you. It sounds like a lot to you because this is not your field. You do not understand how involved this is. So let's talk about it. We can explain it to you. you know.
Yeah. And
So,
I see a lot of people come with the ideas and they're like, well, I just wanted to do, I wanted to have chat features just like WhatsApp. And a lot
yeah,
of times you're not aware WhatsApp is a whole app.
yeah,
And a team of engineers that have created that and maintained that. That's not easy to replicate a lot of
yeah,
times. So
yeah,
yeah, I think
yeah,
those kind of requirement sessions or discovery sessions are critical because to your point,
yeah,
yeah, once you start kind of asking certain questions, they're like, oh, I didn't even think I needed that. Oh, they have
yeah,
to log in? Oh, how they gonna
yeah,
log in? Yeah,
yeah,
all kind of questions come out.
yep,
Well, cool. Okay, okay. Well, let me
yep.
ask you this. I know we've been on for about 40 minutes, so I don't want to take too much of your time, but anybody that would be looking to have a solution created and may approach you or approach a professional to have that created, what's one piece of advice that you'd give them specifically from a design side that they either can help them prepare for that journey,
hmm
or just make sure that that journey is smooth for them.
Sure. So what I would say is one of the most important things to do is to start early. When I say start, I don't mean like you know start the design and start building it out. I mean start the actual like conversations about the idea and start really wrapping your head around like get on a call with me and you, right? And start wrapping your head around what is involved in this idea that you have. Because if you think it's going to take a year, it's probably going to take two or three. Like you
Yes,
need
sir.
to, you need to like really, really like don't drag your feet on it because one of the worst things you can do is end up in a situation where you need to rush something this big because you are what'll happen is you might be forced to put out something subpar that's unpolished out there and just to meet a deadline and that nobody wins like I don't win from a design side because I'm not really I'm ashamed to showcase what's what's out there. You don't win from a development side because you're like this thing doesn't work right because we had to rush
Right.
to get this thing out there and the client is displeased because they're like this doesn't look or function like the way I expected. It's like well because you didn't give enough time. You didn't realize how much time this takes. So time is one of the biggest things. You got to start early. You got to, if however long you think it's going to take, double or triple it, and start, you know, get some consultations with some experts immediately to start really fleshing out the idea.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'll just piggyback on that. I would also add, and you mentioned this earlier. This is to me this is supremely important. Just having a idea of how you're going to market it, how you're going to
Yes.
communicate that it's available, what it does, who it's for, and just kind of thinking through that because a lot of people think I'm just going to develop this and it's going to
Yeah.
they will find if I develop it they will find it.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Doesn't work like that a lot of times. So
Yeah.
cool, cool. Well, now I appreciate the time, man. I always want to say, if you have anything that you are promoting, anything that you want to drive folks to, just to kind of get a little bit more information about VAJ Designs, anything that you'd like to promote, good sir.
Sure. So for VAJ Design, what we are is a full service design agency. So we essentially serve as your dedicated design team. So what that means is if you don't have a full time designer or developer on your team, um, then we can fill that gap for you. So you don't have to worry about paying those salaries. You just pay an agency, and you have the full access to our full team. And what that means is you just have us on an ongoing basis, designing everything that you need, everything for your websites, your mobile apps, for your campaigns, for your offers, for your social media, for your events and conferences. All of those things are being continually worked on an ongoing basis. And so for, you know, businesses, companies out there that if that sounds like where you are, that's what you need, then reach out. Website is vajdesign.com. We are on LinkedIn as well. Same. Uh, Instagram at VAJ underscore design. Facebook at VAJ design. Yep.
Awesome, awesome. Well, cool. Yeah, please reach out to them. They do great work. And like I said, appreciate the time, man.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you, Brandon.
All right, take it easy.
All right. Have a good one.